How about remote viewing? Do you still engage in remote viewing?
I will just simply say yes, and I don't want to expound upon that. It's a topic that some people have trouble digesting, and I get it, and it's very controversial. Um, but that's for another conversation. And fortunately, it looks like our time is up.
Well,
No,
okay.
no, I'm just, I
All
just,
right.
no,
So,
come on, I'm just jerking your chain, man.
okay. Geez, Louise,
No.
man. Look, it's just me and you here, Lou, and maybe 1 million other people.
Yeah.
So, what can you say about it without violating any NDA or what have
Yeah.
you?
So I rarely do this. Let me give you the perspective as it was explained to me, because a lot of it seems like pseudoscience and mumbo jumbo. And the reality is that let's start with an analogy here. Sorry, because it's the way I talk. I'm Latino, and I kind of use analogies to explain myself.
Okay.
So I have five fundamental senses to judge the universe in which I live. And if I can't touch it, taste it, hear it, smell it, etc., I can't perceive it. And yet we know if I had the ability to have, let's say, cell phone vision, and I could see in GPS, I could see in 5G, I could see in AM and FM, I would perceive an entirely different reality around me. I'd be seeing in infrared and ultraviolet spectrums, microwave. So what does that actually mean? It says, well, I live in Wyoming where we have beautiful night skies, and I can look at the stars and say how gorgeous they are. But if I look at that same part of the sky through a radio telescope, I'll see an entirely different reality. I'll see nebula. I'll see things beyond the spectrum that I can normally see. And so therefore, I see more of the universe. Right. Um, so I only perceive through the electro-optical spectrum a very, very, very narrow sliver of what really is out there. And then you have the scalability of the universe, which I won't get into here, but the universe is enormous. And I don't think most people really appreciate just how big the universe really is. Just in the observable universe, there are more stars than there are grains of sand in all the beaches of all the world. So think about that for a minute, what that actually means. Um, so we only perceive, because of how tiny we are to the universe, very, very small fraction of what's really out there. So some people have claimed that remote viewing, some scientists, is that human consciousness, the actual, not the intellectual thought process, but what makes us us and self-aware and sentient,
Hmm.
is a quantum process in the brain and involves a quantum. When I say quantum, literally the field of quantum mechanics. There is a process occurring in the brain, and that is what creates the illusion of self-awareness and consciousness. If that's the case, some scientists have proposed that let's go back to this analogy here that this pretend this is a cigar, right? Smoking a cigar. You can compare time to the analogy of a cigar, where the past of a cigar is the ashes that's already burned. The future is the part of the cigar that hasn't burned yet, that you hold in your hand. And the present is the cherry. It's a moment of ignition. It's a process where the future becomes the past. It's not really an event. And if you were to look at time at a very, very small scale, Planck scale, some scientists believe that time gets fuzzy, meaning that there are elements of the future kind of commingling with elements of the past, and that the cherry, if you will, the moment of ignition of the cigar, it doesn't burn evenly. And perhaps even may explain some of the duality principles of the electron and the electron cloud versus an electron orbit in its valence and actually being able to pinpoint where it is, right? So that was some of the conversation occurring at the time. And so some people had posited that perhaps some people experience the current time, what we consider the present, that cherry being bigger on the cigar, meaning there are more elements of the future and more elements of the past that could potentially be experienced as if they are occurring now. Now, do we have any proof for that? We do not. Do I necessarily subscribe to that? I don't know. What we do know is that there are nonverbal cues. I suspect remote viewing is just as ordinary, and most people experience it all the time and don't realize it. For example, you are in New York and your spouse is in Toronto, and you say, I'm going to call her. And you give her a call, and she says, oh, you know what? I was just thinking about you. I was just going to call you, right? Some have said, well, that's actually a form of remote viewing. that the brains give off electrical signals. We know that. That's how we can tell people are clinically dead or not when they've died in a hospital, is their brainwave function. And some are now saying, well, the brains can give off frequencies that we can actually detect. Is it possible that there are some people that can receive those and interpret those frequencies? I don't know. I'm not a medical scientist. I'm certainly not a neurologist. So I would be completely speaking out of context. But my point is, I think when you get into the conversation of remote viewing and nonverbal communication, I'm pretty confident it's based in science. I'm pretty confident it's not mumbo jumbo, weird woo woo stuff. That at the end of the day, it's probably somewhere embedded within the field of quantum mechanics. If I had to guess, I don't know for sure, but that would be the way I would explain it.
So this cigar theory of time, this fuzzy present, is this something that you've been briefed on? Or is it something you've heard some other physicist speak about and then you're surmising it has something to do with
But
remote viewing?
both. Some people have said that is the way it works, and other people have said this is the way time works. And then within my own experience, that's my observation. But again, let me caveat: I could be wrong, and it's a conversation. There's so little known about it
Yeah.
that it's not always accurate, right? So there's a lot of error and interpretive error there, and it's very subjective. So I can't tell you definitively, other than through my own experience, that it's real and legitimate. There are some incredible statistical findings that the government, I mean, we've actually used to find a downed Russian, for example, a supersonic aircraft, experimental aircraft that crashed in Africa near the Congo, and our best satellites couldn't find it. But it took remote viewers about 30 minutes and they found it. How do you explain that? Well, I don't know. I mean, why do police departments still use psychics to solve cases? Because they have a good batting average. In some cases, they're actually finding the evidence that the police are looking for, right? Um, I, I can't sit here and tell you, to your 1 million viewers and listeners out there, how it works, because I don't know how it works. And I don't even know if it works most of the time. I know it works some of the time, and I'm confident about that. But the mechanics of how it works, I couldn't even begin to tell you, brother. I'm not qualified to have that conversation.
You've just tuned into a special episode brought to you by Planet Wild, your ticket to making a real dent in the global conversation. Ever feel like a superhero when recycling a single bottle? Well, imagine that feeling, but 1,000-fold stronger every month. That's what joining Planet Wild is like. Your membership funds vital projects from saving sea turtles to replanting forests, and you're not left guessing where your money goes. Every contribution is tracked with video updates. I signed up, and for me, it's like watching nature say, man, thank you, each month. Ready to join the ranks of Earth's heroes? Use promo code EVERYTHING9 to have your first month sponsored by us. Dive into action at planetwild.com/everything. And remember, it's not just a donation, it's a partnership for the planet. Oh, there's so much, man. There's so many here. Okay, let's start with physical implants. What are they? Let's hear more about them.
So implants. Let me explain it to you from a immunological perspective, because that I do have some qualifications to discuss. The body has an autonomic immune response when there is ever introduced a foreign object into the body that the body does not recognize. It's the reason why when people have transplants, they have to take transplant drugs to suppress the natural immune response to something in their body belong to them. Okay. And
Yes.
So I have personally held in my hand a sample that came from the Department of Veterans Affairs, but I've also was aware of previous samples very similar, where something, which is going to say something right now, was removed by a surgeon from the Department of Veterans Affairs on an individual, a former U.S. service member who claimed to have had an interaction with a UAP. When they tried to remove this object, according to the surgeon there, who was very upset by this, the object tried to evade being removed, meaning it moved under its own power, under its own metabolism, metabolic capability, and what appeared to the surgeon is trying to avoid detection. Now, why is that significant? because there was no immunocascade response. Meaning, let me give you an example, parasites out there. There's something called a spirochete. Certain trypanosomes have this capability. They're highly motile and they have this little tail that they whip around and they move throughout the body. And when they do that, they create this enormous trail of destruction through what we call an immunocascade response, or a white blood cell response, trying to fight the infection as this thing is moving around. That was not the case with this foreign object that appeared to have encapsulated itself with some sort of, looked like human tissue, maybe from the host, from the person, and yet had I like to say, a technical device, a small metallic. I don't want to say the word chip because that is so cliche. We don't know if it was a chip. It's a piece of metal in there. And around this encapsulated area, there were these what appeared to be referred to as Morgellon fibers. Morgellon fibers comes from the old wizard Morgella, who was the sister of the wizard in King Arthur. So these Morgellon fibers, when under scrutiny, don't seem to have any DNA. Some have said that they're fibers from carpet, that they're artificial fibers or blue and red fibers, but these were not carpet fibers. This was removed from underneath the skin of an individual with a chip, and those fibers can be clearly seen. More, I think, alarming is the fact that one of the forensic pathologists that was looking at this sample said that it had its own metabolism, meaning it still moved underneath the microscope when they were studying it.
Sorry, what's the definition of metabolism being used here?
So anything that is alive gets its energy. Usually we consider, for example, human beings and animals through the ATP, ADP process, adenosine triphosphate to adenosine diphosphate. When you cleave one of those phosphates, you create energy. It's all part of the Krebs cycle, what they call citric acid cycle. Sure. And that is a metabolism, basically. That is how we derive energy from consumption, right? And so you can metabolize and you create energy. Anything that moves requires energy to move. So you either have to have an external energy supply or you have to have an internal energy supply. In this particular case, the object that was removed seemed to have an internal energy supply, right? So it had its own metabolism.
My understanding is that metabolism requires life. Like, you don't infer life from metabolism. You start with something living and then you call it metabolism. Otherwise, you're just making an analogy by saying that something transforms energy, has self-repair, maybe some nutrient processing. But the phone that you have transforms energy. The phone that you have engages in a minor amount of self-repair with its adaptive battery. Maybe there's no nutrient processing, but all of that would have to be shown. So otherwise, you're just making an analogy and saying it's metabolism-like.
Yeah, but this is technological, not biomechanical. Totally different. So this is a technological device is deriving energy through a power source, and that power source is an external power source, usually via a battery, and it's using that in the form of electrons. This is not the case. We're talking about a biological metabolism, right? So the conversion of a biological process through the process of biochemistry to derive energy. And so let me be clear on that. And also, let me finish this other piece for you as well. There's an individual, it's not my story to tell. So maybe this person will become public one day, but he's a senior CIA official who had a very scary UAP encounter with his wife. And they actually went to the CIA and to some of the doctors, and they were able to extract, well, first of all, the individual had a hole punched in the back of their neck. But the wife, when she blew her nose, had a foreign object that was recovered. And so that's, again, I don't want to go too specific because it's not my story to tell. There's an individual that hopefully at some point will feel comfortable about being public about that. For now, I'm not going to say who the person was, but there's a lot of these examples. I know another one that's a good buddy of mine. We worked very close together. That had a very interesting situation as well, where there was potentially some sort of interesting encounter, and as a result, some sort of biological consequence. We talk about the 5 fundamental observables, but there are actually 6, and biological effects was one of them. Yes, we had actual doctors and surgeons looking into the medical consequences of military members and intelligence officials who may have gotten too close to a UAP. So that's that did indeed happen.
I know you got to get going, man, and we can continue talking for another couple hours. So I'll end with this question, which may be simple, maybe it's not, but are we souls or do we have souls?
I think most people do. There's maybe some individuals who don't. Maybe those are the individuals that do bad things to one another because they have the intellect, they have the mind, and they have a body, but somewhere along the way they lack that essence that allows us to connect to one another and empathize with one another and help one another. And because of that, they don't have empathy, they don't have sympathy, and desperate to feel some emotion, they resort to doing bad things, potentially. Um, there is real evil in this world. That is a fact. And I've seen it myself. And you can't negotiate with it. You can't barter with it. It feeds off of pain and suffering of other individuals. So yes, I do believe the soul is real. I believe most people have it, maybe absent in other individuals.
If you enjoyed this toe clipping, then the full video is linked in the description. Don't forget to follow Theories of Everything with Curt Jaimungal on Spotify for exclusive content and in-depth discussions. Your support on Spotify helps us grow and to reach more curious minds like yours. Check out the link in the description and join the Core Toe community on Spotify today. See you there.